I'll call to order the December meeting of the Finance Committee. We will begin with the consent items. Are there any consent items anyone would like pulled for consideration?
C1.
C1?
I was going to say C1, and I want C2D.
C2B?
2D.
2D? And
If there are not any.
Go ahead. I want C3 pulled.
Move approval of the balance.
Okay, we have a motion for balance and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. We'll start with C1, if you'll read it, please.
Item C1, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with United Healthcare for the provision of a retiree Medicare Advantage plan.
Ms. Adams, I think you wanted this pulled.
Yes, looking at the information in our packet that was given to us, when we do things again like this, I need to see both plans or summaries of both plans, or what makes one different from the other, or what made us decide to go with this. I know I read the summary from the either the city manager or the HR manager, but I really would have liked to have seen Blue Cross versus United's plan, because I know it's got to be something different. All of them are different. It might be something very minute, but all of them are different.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Excuse me.
Thing that
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry.
Committee person, I had a question.
I'm sorry, Ms. Burke.
Thank
Go ahead.
you. I was going to ask, when we talk about the changing of insurances, how much input do you have from the employees?
We generally hear from the employees about insurance year-round. When we look at changing our insurance, we usually use a panel of folks. We have a healthcare task force that makes those decisions. It consists of a representative from finance, one from budget, one from HR, and one from employee medical.
Do you have actually an employee who will put an input in? You have your heads of these different groups. But what about the employees? How many employees we have?
It's about 2,400.
This may not can happen now, city manager, but I think when I've been talking about health concerns and employees' input, we need to have some type of, I don't know if you call it a committee of employees, and they'll have a representative that will sit on things like that, like this, to have some input.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Ms. Light.
No, I was wondering, am I correct that Blue Cross Blue Shield backed out by not having a plan that would, that we have relied on before?
Right.
And I'm wondering what that's all about. Do you have any idea is there something hinky going on?
Well, there were some changes with the approval of these plans. Prior to this year, those plans were approved by Medicare, and that was the only approval that was needed for group plans. This year, those plans had to, in addition, be approved by the Department of Insurance, and Blue Cross did not have that approval in time for us to offer it to our employees to ensure that they'd have a plan by January 1st. And so we waited for about as long as we could until we just had to make a move to look at other carriers.
And Department of Insurance is state department?
Yes, the State Department of Insurance.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I had a question, kind of going on the back of Ms. Light's. It is my understanding that Blue Cross, as you just said, does not have a plan to offer us, because what they wanted to offer us was not approved by the state.
Correct.
Now, my concern is it is a pain in the neck for people to switch insurances. And so we got 600 and some Medicare eligible retirees that participate in it. And they all got to go get everything changed at the drugstore, their doctors, and et cetera, et cetera. Either Blue Cross didn't do their paperwork correctly, or the state's not doing their paperwork correctly. But I don't know why Blue Cross, who has 70% market share in the state, and has been in the business forever, and the State Department of Insurance couldn't have gotten this done. And I would like a little more information as to, and it may be finger pointing between those two, but why it wasn't done. I mean, to me, this is a Medicare supplement, isn't it? Part D or whatever it's called. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's millions of people in the country have it, or tens of millions of people in the country have it. And to me, this would have been a no-brainer for Blue Cross. And what I have read is that Blue Cross was late submitting it. And if that's the case, then I think we need to bring Blue Cross in on the table. And if the state dragged their feet in getting it approved, then the state ought to be held accountable. But I'd like to ask each one of those parties
Okay.
what they have to say. I mean, we don't have any choice. That's kind of who we have. But
Right now.
I would like, because I'm concerned, well, this time next year, we're going to switch it again, and then everybody's got to go back to the pharmacy and switch their cards. And it is a lot of trouble.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
From observation and listening to some of the retirees speaking about this, there's a lot of politics in that, I'll tell you right now. And even in calling and talking individuals, they will tell you about all of them and those on the other end and sort of encourage you to get one. And then some people have been given ones that they didn't even ask for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, instead of the Blue Cross, they gave them United Health.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's something legitimate that we need to do a little more.
Yeah. I think we need to go ahead and get this approved today because they got to have it in 3 weeks. But I do think we need to do a little more investigating so that we're not jumping back and forth every 12 months on who does this.
I move for approval.
Is there a second? Other comments?
Other comments?
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me. I would like for you, as you normally do, to just kind of summarize what we're asking staff to go do for us.
Okay.
Because I think I've heard like 2 or 3 things that, like
Okay.
the comparative and.
Okay. Yeah. We're going to vote in a minute. But what we would like for the staff to do, one, is to compare what we're going to next year versus what we have this year as far as this, that, and the other. And secondly, to investigate further why Blue Cross did not have their plan ready.
Okay.
Now, I do know, and I don't believe this is at all attached to the new American healthcare, whatever.
It isn't.
It has nothing to do with that. But it's just, to me, it's just unforgivable that we're switching insurance for 600 people because somebody didn't do the paperwork right. So, and again, I think we talk with both parties involved in it and see what they have to say.
That's
Okay.
second.
I have moved for it. Do you want me to move?
No, we got it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Mr. Taylor had a question, comment?
Yeah, well, I like Councilmember Burke's comments as well on making sure that we look into the concept of having employees come to the table and have input on the types of plans that they'd like to see going forward as well. So not that it's not a top-down decision, but sometimes there needs to be bottom-up decisions as well.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I need to ask the attorney a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Attorney, when we are talking and having these items for discussion on the agenda, we do a lot of discussing before we even get to a motion. Are we using Robert rules for how we carry out our duties and responsibilities up here?
You are using Robert's rules in a flexible sense. The preferred method is to go ahead and get the motion on the table, but again, it's flexible to have some discussion and then do the motion, but certainly get the motion in as early as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next one was C2D.
Item C2D, resolution awarding purchase order for Chevrolet Impalas with Bobby Murray Chevrolet Incorporated.
Ms. Burke, I think you had a question here.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee and mayor and others. When I look at the bids that we received here, we have 2 of our, I know one of the Winston-Salem companies, both of them are in, one's in the county parks, Chevrolet, and Martin Chevrolet Company, but we've gone out of the city to get someone because their price I can see happens to be lower. I've said more than one time, with us having citizens and businesses who support us, who generate revenue back into this community, I would hope that we would do as much as we possibly can, Mr. City Manager, to give them the business because they're the ones who's providing the jobs for our citizens. That's the only comment I want to make.
Mr. Bates, would you like to comment on that?
Well, we certainly we work diligently to identify local dealerships, but the law is pretty pretty clear for us that we are required to award to the lowest responsive bidder. And in this particular case, Bobby Murray was the lowest responsible bidder.
Okay.
I understand all that clearly, but I think it's important that we also make it for the minutes and for the public
Okay.
awareness that we support our local businesses.
Okay. Mr. Montgomery, do you have a comment?
It's a comment. Although I know the law states that if we're going to accept a bid at this time, we accept the lowest responsible bidder. But the fact still remains that we actually don't have to accept any bids at all if we decide they're not to. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. We're not required.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we knew that.
Yeah.
We can reject all bids.
And from time to time, we do that. Do we have a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. If we're on the consent area, we're on C3 at the current moment.
Item C3, ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the city of Winston-Salem, North Carolina for the fiscal year 2013-2014.
Ben, could you comment on what this is? I'm particularly concerned with and I was the one that put this on there, the sweepstakes money and what's going on there?
Yes, Chairman Clark, the First Amendment there, at last month's Community Development, Housing, General Government Committee meeting, there was discussion about establishing the electronic sweepstakes use, and one of the proposals that came from a council member was to basically designate any of the excess revenue, net revenue from those operations to designate for economic development. And what staff had suggested was that to go into a fund for future RUCA projects. Mm-hmm. So what this particular amendment does is we've estimated for this fiscal year, based on that UDO amendment, there would be net revenue of $241,000 available for future RUCA projects. And so this amendment basically appropriates that money set to the side of that fund.
Now, that went through general government last month.
Yes, sir.
Did it go to the council?
Goes on December 16th, next month.
Next month, okay. All right.
But this is for this current fiscal year, so the money's been paid.
Okay. Well, make Ms. Burke happy. Is there a motion on this item?
Move approval.
Second. Okay, now I'll make my comment. I am not going to be voting for it. I do not believe that we should be earmarking money. I think the money comes in, you put together a budget on where you spend it, and those priorities change from time to time. And right now, we may want to spend it on this. Next year, we may spend it on that. And I just don't believe that we should encumber the budget by creating all these little buckets that you throw money in. So I will not be voting in favor of it. Mr. Taylor?
I'll concede and speak up.
Mr. Montgomery, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
I think Ms. Adams had it first, but I'll
go ahead.
Go ahead. I understand the perspective in terms of not earmarking, but I think in some ways we do that anyways in several different areas. But particularly if you look at the RUCA program itself and how we have historically funded the RUCA program, I think that it's incumbent upon ourselves, if we're going to continue to have the financial impact that this specific program has had, then we have to make sure we identify a source of revenue to continue to fund that, because the way it has been, the last round was funded, we won't see those dollars back again the same way. So I think we do have to look at how we'll fund this program in the future, and I think this is a good way to look at it.
Thank you.
Did Ms. Adams, you have?
Yes, just to kind of ditto what Councilmember Montgomery said, this particular program, the RUCA program, the budget in itself has buckets. So this is no different than all of the other items and operational things that are on the budget, whether it's economic development or housing grants or housing services and home and whatever. I think part of economic development, community development going to the future is this is how we're going to have to look at it in order to ensure that certain areas of our city, again, get some type of parity from the taxpayers' money. Again, I have no issue with what we do, but I think we need to start thinking out of the box as to how we help the entire community with these types of funds. And I think this is one of these out-of-the-box concepts that Councilmember Taylor helped to bring to the table. that we need to look at as to how we fund these type programs going forward.
Mr. Taylor, you had a comment?
Yeah, I think both points were both points that I would have made. This happens to have been my brainchild, and you all know there is a great degree of uncertainty when it comes to sweepstakes operations in various cities. Charlotte does something different. Raleigh may be doing something different. But in this city, they've been allowed to operate, but we have taxed them. And, as Councilmember Montgomery mentioned, historically, the RUCA program has been funded from the Dale Repayment Fund, and, we will not see those dollars again. There's a possibility. There may not be a possibility, but we have to continue to put pots of money together that revitalizes our urban commercial areas. If you take the Southeast Ward, for instance, we've had lots of economic development solely based upon the RUCA program. And there are other communities that have been very beneficial with this RUCA program. And I understand, Councilmember Clark, you don't like earmarks. Your point is well taken. But the good that this program is doing and will do far outweighs, I believe, your point. So I would ask that the committee pass this. Let's tax these sweepstakes operations and make sure we continue to revitalize our urban commercial areas.
Ms. Light, you have
Yes. The way I see it, the Dell pot of money is earmarked, if you want to use that word, as economic development fund, and the RUCA programs have in fact been paid for out of that. I see no difference in either earmarking the sweepstakes money or just simply putting it in the same pot as the Dell and using it for whatever economic development.
Ms. Mayor.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think that the RUCA program's really proved its merit here in the community, and like Councilmember Taylor said, I agree. Earmark's not necessarily good. We don't know how long we're going to have the sweepstakes monies coming in, so I'd say let's use it the best we can while we got it. So I think it's a pretty good use of it.
That's exactly why I'm voting against this. In a budget, you look at your priorities. And if you think RUCA's important, then put $1 billion, whatever you want. But because the sources are uncertain, that's why you do a budget. The sweepstakes go away tomorrow. Who knows?
They don't get the money back this year, though.
But whatever. Lord, if there is a piece of revenue stream that is uncertain, it is the sweepstakes. And that's why, to me, you put together a budget every year, you look at all your revenue, and you look at your expenses, and you change the priorities however you want. But you don't sit out here and grab some little bucket of money and say, we're only going to spend it here. Well, how about if sweepstakes go away? Does that mean we're not going to spend money on RUCA? No. It's simply what it is. Anyway, that's my opinion. Everybody's expressed theirs. We'll go with that.
I'm getting ready to make a motion.
Well, we already got a motion. I've already got a motion.
All right, but I'm getting ready to make a comment then.
All right, go ahead. We had a motion early on.
We haven't talked so long, but I agree with Councilmember Montgomery, Councilmember Adams, the mayor, Councilmember Light, and Councilmember Keller. I believe we're going to have our votes on that.
Yeah. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Passes 3-1. Thank you. We will now go to the general agenda.
Item G1, resolution authorizing a lease agreement with Coliseum Park Plaza Corporation, providing space for the relocation of employee medical, HR training, engineer field office, 710 Coliseum Drive.
Mr. Turner, why don't you refresh our memories on what we're doing here so everybody can be up to speed, please?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is an item to lease space for 2.5 years to accommodate temporary relocation of the city yard operations for employee medical, engineering field office, and employee training. This need is being driven by the Salem Creek Connection project, which will go through the middle of City Yard, and in fact will go right through the building where these three functions are housed. Two of these functions, employee training and employee medical, are closely tied together and can't be separated. So we have data on how engineering field office and employee medical / employee training could be used or housed in a different location temporarily. The ultimate location for all these functions is a piece of property the city bought on Lowry Street.
So we're looking to temporary house for 2.5 years.
Correct.
Okay. Is someone here from real estate? I don't see Kurt.
I'm going to handle it, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right. With that, are there any other questions before let me check the committee first, Mr. Montgomery?
This is, you're looking for a motion, or are you looking for a comment, or?
Well, I was going to see if there's any questions on what Mr. Turner just said before we go.
Well, I will, specifically on the splitting up of the different locations. Can you give us, again, some more information? I know it's listed here, and I've read it personally, but just what that means.
Essentially, what we looked at is what are the requirements for those two functions. And you'll see in a table in your package that for engineering field office, we're essentially looking at office space of about 5,500 square feet. For employee medical / employee training, we're also looking at about 5,500 square feet, and total of 75 parking spaces for both facilities. So that could be divided in half. However, with employee medical / employee training, there's a requirement that because we're going to be bringing in heavy trucks directly from the field, including garbage trucks, even fire engines, that we will want a facility that can accommodate heavy-duty pavement. Obviously, a facility has to be upfit, has to be capable of accommodating the number of parking spaces and that type of vehicle activity, and it also should be in an area where citizens are going to expect office-type activities as opposed to residential-type activities, even though, because it's governmental activity, these type of operations could go in pretty much any zoning category. There's a table in your package that goes through in detail what we found about each of the specific locations. We looked at 30 different locations, including 13 different data elements, because there was a specific request from council to provide more information on the data. And you will see that there are 2 sites that could accommodate employee medical. Those 2 sites could also accommodate both employee medical and engineering field office. And there's probably 6 or 8 sites that could accommodate engineering field office only. And the fundamental difference between the sites is the heavy-duty pavement availability.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
I have a question.
Well, Ms. Burke likes for me to get a motion first.
Yeah, he had his hand up.
Go ahead. Go ahead. You have a question? Go ahead.
I have a question, but I have a motion, but it's not on it specifically what's here. It's a difference from what's stated, so that's why I would like to explain it or go ahead and make the motion.
Would you like to make a motion? Did you say you want?
I'd like to hear what he has.
Why don't you just make some comments then? As the chair, I will allow you to comment if you'd like.
Well, as we look at this, and we've asked questions and we had some concerns about actual locations and selection locations, and the way that staff has presented it in terms of opportunities that both of these do not have to be joined together, my recommendation and motion would be that we actually separate the two, specifically the leaving emergency medical and training at the Coliseum Drive location and taking the engineering office and putting that at the 1225 East 5th Street location, which has already been something that the city has seen as an opportunity to help move things forward. And for me, as we look at this, even though it's a short-term lease, my position is that when we have these, that we do it in areas that we can help stimulate some things that are happening. One concern over in that area was because many things will be leaving, it'll be good to have some continued presence. The 1225 location is a location that we are working towards trying to help rebuild commercial and office space, which I think can help move to do the same thing.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? We've heard Mr. Montgomery's suggestion. Did you have a...
I have a question. On the matrix that you gave us that shows all of the locations, and in the column that says extent of uplift, minimum, moderate, extensive, there are more than half that are not available. I understand that from looking at the size of the building and everything else, but my question is for the first site on 32nd Street, did we look at the building on the inside, or did we just, I know we said not available. What does that mean? And I read the small print at the bottom, but I'm asking, like, why? What does that mean? Other factors associated with the site, my question is, what type of lease would these people have offered, and did we talk to the owners?
The answer to your first question is the reason that it's not available is that there wasn't time for the owners to get us information back on what the upfit cost would be. nor time for staff to go through the building and evaluate what would be required in order to bring it up to the requirements. The answer to the second question is, I'm sorry, repeat it for me, please.
You just answered it when you said that you didn't really, the owner said that they wouldn't have time. Is that what you said?
Correct. And I think your second question was, did we look at all of them? We looked at about 10 of the locations, and this was not one of the ones that we went inside to look at. The information on its capacity was based upon the information in the real estate listings of the property.
Mr. Mayor had a question.
Well, I think Councilman Adams, I heard it wondered if this number item West 2nd Street would do a 2.5-year lease.
We do not know at this point.
Don't know. But just following up, as Councilmember Montgomery had mentioned, this is a short-term lease, and we can use that to advantage to help some of these areas here. The area up on Coliseum Drive, I know that the owner of that has spent quite a bit of dollars to try to make that area look a lot better. So bringing in and try to help that person, that development for a short period of time, I think is a good idea. And I think your idea of splitting the two can help spread some of that economic impact. And so I think that's a good suggestion.
I listened to Mr. Montgomery, and I agreed with Mr. Montgomery in that he stated, and we stated earlier, when we purchased the city tax dollars, the 5th Street building, I was under the impression we were going to try to do as much as we can to use that building for government types of things. Earlier, I had heard Councilwoman Adams talk about having more government things in her area. Is this Coliseum area?
The Coliseum is not. It's across the street, kind of from the North Ward. It's not.
Oh, whose ward is it
It's
in?
in Councilman
Well, I was
McIntosh's
thinking, I
ward.
came here ready to
No.
go along. I
No.
thought that this was yours,
No,
and that was his.
that's kind of how this all got initiated, Councilmember Burke.
32nd Street is in the north.
Just as in Mr. McIntosh, go ahead.
Two questions. Is the space on Coliseum Drive available as a partial, or is it an all or nothing lease? Can we carve out 5,500 square feet if we decided to?
We don't have an answer for that at this point. Okay. We would hope that we could carve out and just do half of it, but we don't have a definitive answer.
And then my other question is, are the annual lease costs inclusive of the upfit?
Yes.
Okay.
For that site.
For that site, but not necessarily for the others?
Not necessarily.
I was wanting to ask about, I mean, you know, obviously if we took 2 sites, it's going to be twice the price or whatever. And certainly we'd have to know if the answers to these not available questions. My problem is I gather that we are coming up against the wall right now as far as having to get it done.
That's a good question.
That is correct. However, it won't be twice the cost because we'll be leasing half
Fewer
the
square
space
feet.
per location.
Oh, okay, okay.
But how about timing?
Timing is critical. We do need a decision from council this month in order to have a hope for the developer, whoever it is, to upfit the building in time for us to move in by April.
And is, oh, sorry. I was concerned too about, okay, this road is going to be going smack through City Yard. How do we secure what's remaining there? Because it's a secure facility as it stands. Is the state going to build us some walls or fences or
We'll
what?
be looking at fencing it.
Okay. We will do it.
Either if it's not on their plan, we will make sure that we do it as part of our security of the site.
Yes.
Ms. Montgomery, oh, wait. Ms. Burke?
I was going to ask Mr. Turner, I have a concern. Tell me again, why come you didn't do the 32nd Street?
32nd Street was a location that, because of its distance from City Yard, the fiber optic cable and the travel time was going to be more expensive, so we did not assess it as part of our initial recommendation. These are the sites that that the Public Works Committee reviewed the last 2 months, and so we brought those back to you with additional information. What we were able to provide, we included. If we weren't able to get the information in time, we provided that note to indicate that it wasn't available and why.
And you may have it, but the upfit well, who's going to do the upfit?
It's the it's the landlord's requirement to do the upfit in all these scenarios.
I know one said this morning, one of the landlords, that they were going to do it, but I want to make sure that they will bear that expense to whoever we would be giving to.
That's a condition of whatever site we rent, is that they do the upfit.
Oh, thank you.
Montgomery.
And just to add additional comments in reference to the 1225 Fifth Street location, I have had a conversation with their real estate individuals who was contacted by the city at some point in terms of asking some questions. But just to follow up with them today, they stated that they felt that they could have the site ready for the date and time that we're looking at, seeing as they've already started the work on building because of other individuals moving into the building. As well, that the actual lease rate that they will be able to get to would be at or below what was agreed upon for crime prevention to move into the facility. So it would be right around what we would be looking at with the rest of the sites on the list.
Mr. Garrett.
I might suggest, since we are up against a timeline, but it sounds like we're down to 3 sites that we're for either partial or in all cases, I think we're down to 3 sites for partials, just a matter of which 2.
Yes.
We could, you could send it forward without a recommendation, and we could sit down this week with those 3 landlords and give you all the information by Monday night if you would prefer to make the final decision.
Yeah, because I certainly think we need to know, one, can they subdivide it? I guess we're looking for roughly 5,500 square feet.
Correct.
What is their price for that, and is upfit included, or should be included? And can they be ready whatever time we need?
Right.
That sounds like a good suggestion.
Would you like that to be moved?
Yeah, Ms. Burke, would you move that?
I would move, Mr. Chairman and members, that we send this to the council, but not without a motion.
Without a recommendation.
Without a recommendation, and then we'll be able to vote on it.
With the understanding that they'll
Yeah,
come back with
everything.
information on those 3 sites.
Those
And those
3
3 sites are 32nd Street, Coliseum Drive, and East 5th Street. Is there a
Second.
There's a second. Any other questions, comments?
So we'll make that decision on which site
Monday night.
at the actual meeting.
Site or sites?
Okay.
Site or site, yes, sir.
Yes.
I have one more comment.
Yes, ma'am.
One thing is, again, as we move forward as a team, we need to make sure we bring all of the information that we can bring to this body for us to be able to make the decisions as concise and as efficient and productive as we can. When we're brought information that I have one choice, then that sends a flag up for me, and I'm sure my counterparts, that you only gave me one choice, when I know there are more choices or options than that in order for me to make a good decision. I'm asking staff as we move forward, bring the information. And if you feel like you don't know how much information we need, make a phone call, send an email. We have this particular project coming and we only have one choice. Is there something else that you need from us in order for you to make a viable decision? Because now we're talking time-sensitive elements. But as you see, we have everyone here but one council member. And we can't make a decision until we have the data in front of us to make the choice. So when we do this, I ask you, just give us the information that we need to do this. Thank you.
And
Okay.
Mr.
Yes, ma'am.
Chairman, but the city manager is the one that would be directing their matter, what you want.
Okay, we got all that? That's been voted on? Did we vote? We didn't vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise? Okay. We'll now go to G2.
Item G2, consideration of items relating to funding for wireless broadband internet service at 7 multifamily rental developments. A, resolution authorizing funding to Novation Broadband and continuation of wireless broadband internet service at 7 multifamily rental developments. And B, ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the fiscal year 2013-2014.
Okay, Mr. Page, should I look to you for this?
Yes, sir.
Can you kind of refresh our memories, because this was continued from the October meeting?
Yes, sir. This item was continued from October. It was presented to council to continue wireless internet services with Novation broadband internet at 7 different multifamily locations, including Astor Park, Arbor Oaks, Providence Place, Willows Peak, Millbrook, and Ladera Crest for those 7 locations. Question came up during the council meeting regarding the success of the program for those communities that currently have the internet service. You'll recall we've been providing internet service for the last 3 years in these complexes, or been partnering to provide internet service in these complexes. We did go to the school system and ask for additional information regarding the success of the students that have access to the internet in these complexes. While they couldn't specifically state that that this internet service was the single most important factor that is directly benefiting these youth, they were able to state that in all of these instances, the schools have either exceeded or met expectations, and they feel, except I think 1 or 2 small ones, but overall they feel that the students are doing much better and have attributed the internet service as being one of the factors that contribute to that.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
That's a question. When you look at these 7 multi-units, I asked you to look at this again because I wanted to know how many people in the area, let's say Ladera Crest, how many families are able to use this product. And I wanted to know more about how that school actually was tracking them to say it met or did not meet the growth. Can you tell me how many families? And Mr. Page, and it's not you, it's how, did they send you, when they told you about these statistics, did they tell you from that data that they collected how many actually lived in Millbrook? And how many in these classes, when you look here, are you looking at the reading, math, science, and algebra? And how could you tell me, how can they say who really met growth or did not meet growth?
Councilman Burke, they don't have it that specific. This is very general information. They were telling us that they can't track it by specific student that has access, whether or not they met growth. All they can provide us is data that says in this school year, they exceeded growth compared to a previous school year. One of the things that may be contributing to that increase is the fact that internet access for these kids has been made available. But no, they don't have specific data.
And people make studies, say what they want them to say. Mr. Chairman, I wasn't completely, I'm not that I'm going to vote against it, but I'm really not impressed so much with what they're giving me back this information.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Adams?
And I guess kind of like what Councilmember Burke said, do we know whether the internet service, and maybe you do, is it offered to all of the units or just the units with children?
It's offered to all of the units.
All of the units. And the residents are not able to, or at present, they don't contribute any contribution to the cost of the cable.
Actually, right now, they are purchasing cable because what has happened is there's been a gap between when our contract
ended
and when theirs is, we're trying to renew this service. So right now, they're actually on the market paying for internet service. And internet service probably runs $50 a month, roughly.
Yeah, it's expensive.
Right.
You should see my bill. I guess my only last question
Go ahead.
is that, do we know of any other cities in the proximity of Winston or the size of Winston that's doing this, and are other municipalities contributing to this?
I
keep seeing this gentleman's hand back in the back.
I'm not aware of any, but let me call on Chris Exton with Novation, the representative, and he can probably answer
over
that
there,
question.
please, sir. Give your name and address for the record, please.
Sure. My name is Chris Active with Novation Broadband. to specifically address your question, we are working very closely with the City of Raleigh, for example, on the same situation as we are with the Winston. The City of Raleigh has 1,600 units that we're looking for support over the next 12 to 24 months to help kind of transition into the Lifeline subsidy.
But I guess I'm like Councilmember Burke. When I looked at the statistics in 2 of these schools that they listed in my ward, particularly one of them, I'm not impressed with what I see. Whether it's the Pareto's or just the chart, I'm not impressed. And I guess another concern, again, is the fact that we don't even know whether there are children in the house that we're providing cable service to. And I understand that everybody can't afford cable and internet, but it just leaves the question as to, like Councilmember Burke said, are we sure of what we're doing here and if we're getting the best bang for the buck, and how do we measure that? I'm uncertain about that.
Mr. Montgomery had a comment.
Yeah, I think it's necessary to have some good statistics on the number of individuals impacted and those who are actually benefiting. But I don't think that you can solely put the success of that individual school on those individual children having access to broadband. But on the other side of that, I don't think that it's any question to those sitting around the table that every neighborhood that's listed here is a neighborhood that is dealing with some issues of economics in those neighborhoods. And so I think that any opportunity that we can have to impact those neighborhoods with a service like this that reduces the encumbrance, monthly encumbrance on those families, I think goes a great deal ways beyond just the initial impact that we're looking at on those children, but even beyond that. So this is something I want us to get the details that we want to make a decision to move forward on, but it's something I fully support because I think it has an impact on those neighborhoods, those children, and those families all together. But I think we do need to make sure we have the data to support all that's been asked here today.
May I?
Just go ahead.
I was going to speak to sir.
Yes.
Now, in doing this, were you up in Reserve Press?
Yes, I met with Ike Black and property manager 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry?
I'm going to ask you a question.
Oh.
I'm going to ask you who you met with.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you in a few minutes.
Okay.
But the important thing, did you meet with the families out there? And how many of those families did you meet with?
I did not meet with the families. I met with Ike, who had been talking with the families, and asked him to represent them.
See, now, we're in America. We're in America. Why do you meet with someone who's directly and not give the courtesy to the parents and their children involved in meeting with them? See, I like Mr. Black. I'm very fond of him. It's nothing against Mr. Black, but he cannot speak for those units, for those parents and the children. And that's one other thing that I look at data. That's all I used to do when I was in the school system. Collect data. We make it like we want to. We communicate with good, bad, and different. And so, Mr. City Manager, it's not that I'm going against this program, but I've said earlier that we do not have enough internet for our citizens to become really fully aware of what's going on. And when we have companies who come, when we first got this company started, over there, I was standing right out there, I believe you were too. And we thought that it would just, all of them soon would be exposed to it. And I forgot who was in charge at that particular time, who had ownership of it, and then I think it changed or something. I just feel that when we bring this kind of information and parents are involved, we need to give the parents the respect and the children to participate. And you need to see some type of a survey that they have participated.
Ms. Light?
Oh, well, in fact, I don't know who ran this survey, but on page 93 and beyond, there is a survey, I assume, of the families. So, you know, that is one thing, that there has been input. To my mind, though, I mean, and certainly it would be better if we could gather more statistics. But the fact remains, we're talking about $40,000, and it's for kids, not just kids, but if it gives a leg up to kids who need it, then it's well worth it. So I certainly will support this when it comes to council. But it would be good to have some more information.
Let me ask a question. I'm going to broaden this way beyond what we're talking about here, but to me, it's a fundamental question. Is internet access kind of a necessity? And we keep talking about the kids. How about the person who wants to try to look for a job? That type of stuff. And then the question is, if it is that important that we feel like everyone should have it, then for those who can't afford it, to what degree can the city afford or should subsidize internet access? And here we're just talking about 7 apartment complexes. It seems like to me what we need is more of a broad policy. And you folks know these areas better than I do, but there's got to be a lot more than 7 apartment complexes.
It is.
And so I guess I'm thinking we need to take a step back and look and see if we don't need a policy here. And can we, anyway, Mr. Page, you're going to enlighten me.
I was going to respond to the first part of your statement, Councilman Clark. These 7 apartment complexes are apartment complexes that the city has invested in some way in the past, either through the housing authority or through loans. So we were trying not to compete with the private sector and start subsidizing wireless broadband citywide, but we're trying to be more focused using CDBG funding on some of those areas that we've already provided assistance to in the past. Of course, we can look at a citywide policy. For example, we're currently providing free wireless, I think, on 4th Street still. We can still look at ways to do that if that's something that the council would like us to do.
Well, I'm just food for thought there. Yes, Mr. Sanders.
I somewhat agree with you as to how we look at this again going forward. There are lots of plans and groups and organizations trying to address the education and the success of the students and children of Forsyth County. And we all, just like all of the other entities, we do our own thing. But I'm wondering, with initiatives like the United Way's initiative on education to increase the graduation rate and get the test scores up, along with the other agencies, the Urban League. I mean, there are numerous. It's numerous organizations. How do we all get together to see, and I've said this to the United Way when I was on the allocations board, how do we ensure that we are being successful? Because of confidentiality, we can't track students and everything. I understand that. But there's still got to be a way where as we work together as a team to ensure the success and that we maximize our dollars and inputs for success. And I think going forward, we need to look at that, Councilmember Clark, as you said, to some degree, as to how we pull in these other organizations and nonprofits and foundations and things to help make this better.
A couple things. One, when it comes to the holistic approach that Councilmember Adams mentioned, I think there are some individuals that are working diligently on that. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with the conversation that happened about from cradle to career. Much of that surrounds that very same thing, is how do you really track that performance of the children as they go through and even where they are in that whole process. So I think as a community, we are kind of looking at some of those things. But when you look at certain community organizations and nonprofits in our community, such as the Urban League, that has a job links location where individuals come in to use their community computers to gain access to look for jobs. Goodwill, who has similar services where individuals come into those facilities to get access to the internet, to get on the computers, to access opportunities for career development, and several other agencies that do the same thing. Clearly, there's a section of our community that does not have access to internet, which we know today is a necessity if you're going to conduct certain type of business connect. And so for me, I think this is just a small impact on that, and I would be very interested in seeing what a larger impact we could have if we were looking at anything larger. But I think just as we move forward, this is something I think we need to continue to do, and if we desire to expand it, which I think there'll be more who could benefit if we did, but I think this is something that we should continue to move forward with.
Do you want a motion?
Yeah.
I move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Other comments, Mr. McIntosh?
Just a quick question about pricing.
Yeah.
Were these competitively bid, and how are they priced? Is it per unit? within the complexes?
It's a bulk rate service provided to the property. It can be averaged out to a bulk, per unit price.
But it wasn't arrived at by determining the number of units.
No.
Okay. All in favor of the motions?
I'm thinking about community development block grant funding, community and business development department, the general fund. What does this $33,880 come from, Mr. City Manager?
I believe it's Housing Finance Assistance Funds, is that right? Housing Finance Assistance Funds.
Thank you.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
As we talked about internet access, I wanted to remind the council that, the committee, that several months ago this council approved the city participating with the cities of Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, and all the universities associated with those great cities, including ours, in a Gig U high-speed broadband internet RFP, and we're in the process of reviewing those right now. Part of that design is to create the infrastructure for jobs and technology and make us really have the high-speed infrastructure that competes with the highway, really. But another part of it is to allow a very competitive low-price access for citizens at a very reasonable rate as part of what we're looking at. So we'll be coming back hopefully soon, I believe, Mr. Turner.
That's correct. I think in the next few months.
Right. Good. Well, I'm glad we're involved in that initiative. We'll now go to G3, please.
Item G3, presentation of the City of Winston-Salem Annual Financial Report for fiscal year 2012-2013.
Good afternoon, council members and mayor. I'd like to introduce Eddie Burke. He is a partner in charge with Cherry Becker. They're our auditors who do our audit every year and will be presenting the financial report. In your package this week, you got a copy of the comprehensive annual financial report. That's the basic financial statements, supplementary information, and single audit information.
Do you have any extra copies?
I'm going to bring
thank
them.
you. We need a few up here.
I'm also going to pass out today. It's a smaller version.
Yeah.
In the report, it just doesn't include statistical information and grant information. I'm also going to pass out Eddie's presentation.
And this has the budget and everything else in it, too.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, if you'll pass all those out. You could hold just a second till we get everything passed out. Because the big one has not only our official audit, but it has in the budget that we put together each year and all that.
Anybody needs a big one, I can walk next
No,
door and get one.
The large one has a lot more detailed information than the summary statement that she's given you.
Thank you. You give your name and address for the record, please, and which document do you want us to look at?
My name is Eddie Burke. I'm a partner with Cherry Becker, and I live in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm happy to be here today. With me today is Katie Jones. She's out of the Asheboro office. Katie was the senior that worked on the engagement. You have before you the document that Lisa just handed out, the shorter version. That is a copy of the financial statements. Inside that document, there's two letters. One is what we refer to as a SAS 114, or required communication letter. The second document is actually a management letter. What we have done is in this document, which is referred to as audit wrap-up and presentation, we have taken all that information and consolidated it into this one. So
Okay.
I will be referring to this document. This is what I refer to as the English version of the audit.
All right, thank you.
So if you would turn to page 2, and the page numbering is on the bottom left-hand side of the page. This sort of goes through at a very high level what I'm going to be discussing today. First, I'd like to do an overview of the audit. Every audit has what I refer to as an area of focus where we spent the majority of our time. Doesn't mean we didn't do other things, but it was our focus area. Then I'd like to spend a few minutes going through the results of the audit. And then as far as the required communication, there's certain things that we are required to communicate to the governing body on an annual basis. And then this last section, accounting metrics, that's where we get into the numbers a little bit. That's sort of a snapshot of some of the key numbers that are reflected into the financial statements. If you would turn to page 3, we have completed our audit of the city for June 30, 2013. We completed our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards. And very quickly, our responsibility as your auditors is threefold. First, to make sure that we complete our audit in accordance with the standards. Secondly, to issue our opinion on the financial statements. And thirdly, if there are certain matters that arise during the audit process, we're required to communicate certain matters to you. Page 4, as far as the audit is concerned, we did look at the internal control environment of the city. Primarily what we're doing there is looking at the key areas and processes, receipts, disbursements, payroll, application processes, things along those lines. Get an understanding of those processes in order to determine whether or not the processes in itself are reliable and the control environment is good. We also looked at the administrative controls. I'm on page 5 of the city. The city receives various federal and grant dollars, and each of those federal and grant dollars carry with it certain restrictions. There should be administrative controls in place to make sure that people understand what the requirements and the restrictions are, and that those policies and procedures and requirements are being adhered to. So we actually look at the various grants that we look at each year and look at those administrative controls to gain an understanding that the control environment is good and, again, can be relied upon. We did ask and receive a number of information records from the city. All the information that we requested throughout the process was freely provided to us, and we did receive full cooperation from the city and all the personnel throughout the audit process. Turning to page 6, the areas of focus. I'm not going to go through all of these areas, but primarily the key ones I wanted to spend a few minutes on is the reporting standards. There were 2 new key reporting standards that had to be implemented this year, GASB Statement 63 and 65. If you were to look at your current year financials and compare them, there's a couple more columns or descriptions on the financial statements. There's a term called deferred inflow of resources and a term called deferred outflow of resources. That's directly related to the implementation of GASB Statement 65. All that really has done to your financial statements, it's made certain items that was previously reported be reclassified into certain categories onto the financial statements. We spent a lot of time in your cash and investments, and you can see the other areas on pages 6 and 7 where we spent a great deal of our time. On page 7, we did look at litigation or potential litigation primarily from our perspective as to whether or not you had any litigation pending that rose to the level of being disclosed or accrued on the financial statements. And we also looked at the various estimates and judgments that were used by management in preparing the financial statements, primarily looking to determine that the processes that you were using were consistent and they followed general best practices in regards to those particular areas. Page 8, which is the results of the audit. As far as the financial statements are concerned, the city did receive an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion. That terminology has changed this year due to the clarity standards, which I'll go into in just a few minutes. That is the highest level of assurance that we can provide on a set of financial statements. As far as the control environment is concerned, there were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses noted. And then finally, from a statutory perspective, as far as North Carolina general statutes, we found the city to have complied with the general statutes during the year. Page 9, as far as OMB Circular A133, and this is the opinion on the federal dollars that was received and administered this year. The city also received an unmodified opinion. There were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses noted. There were 3 non-material, non-compliance findings reported in the financial statements. One had to do with special tests and provisions. There were no question costs associated with that. The other had to do with earmarking, and there was a question cost of $150. And then finally, there was one having to do with allowable cost principles, and there was a question cost there of around $13,000. Turning to page 10, this is the opinion on the state dollars that were administered and spent during the year. The city did receive an unmodified opinion on that. The internal control environment was found to be strong, and there was no statutory or no noncompliance issues noted in regards to the state dollars that were administered. Page 11, key items on this page. I mentioned Gatsby Statement 63 and 65. That had to be implemented this year. That standard included a couple of things. The terminology, I think you used to have a statement of net assets. It's now referred to as statement of net position. And then the deferred inflows and the deferred outflow issue that I described. The other item that affected you in regards to the implementation of 65, in the past, under the old standards, deferred bond issue costs was being recorded on the balance sheet and amortized over the life of the bond. 65 actually changed that. It is now being written off as the expenses incurred. The city was actually required to go in and evaluate the unamortized bond issue costs that had been spent and was being amortized in prior years. There's actually a prior period adjustment on the financial statement to write that off. That is very common across the state of North Carolina, and it's a prior period adjustment that's affecting most units across the state. There were no adjusting journal entries, no past adjusting journal entries. We did receive a signed management representation letter, which was basic certain questions that we asked. We got signature and approval and verification that what we were told was in fact true. There was a new auditing standard that had to be implemented this year. It's called the Clarity Standard. The major impact that it affected on the city was the wording of the audit reports themselves. We're saying the same thing. The verbiage has changed a little bit. There were some headings listed on the opinions this year that was not there in the past. From a management letter perspective, we had 4 comments, none of those which we considered significant or material. One having to do with city policy, a report not being filed timely, an invoice was submitted late, and there was a couple of comments in there about IT best practices. Overall, very minor in the scheme of things as far as the audit was concerned. Then if you would turn to page 15, really a quick snapshot of the numbers. This is on a full, these first couple of comments having to do with full accrual, government-wide statements. Total assets increased or decreased by about $8.4 million. Primarily, the majority of that was the writing off of those unamortized bond issue costs, which was amounted to $5.7 million, which was on the books in the prior year. Governmental, or the liabilities, went down by about $28 million. Primarily, that had to do with a contract payable maturing and being paid off during the year, and the valuation of the liability for a derivative instrument going down at June 30, 2013. Page 16, governmental activities as far as the revenues were concerned. Revenues increased about $4.9 million, primarily that having to do with property taxes and the rate increase that was implemented last year. Total expenses actually went down by about $11 million. Primarily that was in 2 areas, environmental health and protection expenses. From a business activity perspective, revenues increased about $21 million. 11.4 of that had to do with the return on the investments. Secondly, about $5 million of that was an increase in charges for services, and then about 5.6 was an increase in capital grants and contributions that were received during the year. Overall, the expenses in that particular area remained pretty flat from the prior year. Page 17 and the rest of the charts has to do with, majority of them having to do with general fund statements. This page 17 is the assets and the liabilities of the general fund at the end of the year. No particular issues on any of those. I would like to go to page 18, which is a snapshot of the fund balance in the general fund. You'll see at the end of the year, unassigned fund balance was around $32 million. That's around 18% of the budgeted expenses in the general fund, which is very, very good at the end of the year. Page 19 is sort of a snapshot of the general fund's revenues and expenses. By far the biggest revenue in the general fund is taxes, which was around $108 million. As far as expenses, your largest expense is in public protection, which was running around $82 million, which was, again, very consistent with the prior year. And then pages 20 and 21, that's sort of a snapshot of your capital assets by your categories. No major points on that between the governmental activities and business activities. On 21, which is a snapshot of your debt at the end of the year, for your governmental activities, your biggest obligations is general obligation bonds, which is around $88 million, and contracts payable, which is around $100 million. And then from a business perspective, business type activities perspective, your largest debt obligation is in revenue bonds. And then finally on page 22, that's sort of a snapshot of the federal and the state dollars that you received this year. You can see that you administered about $30 million in federal and state grant dollars. Around $17 million of that was federal, $14 million of that was in state. Overall, in concluding, the city's in good, sound financial condition at June 30, 2013. The control environment we found to be very good, and we also found the city to be administering its federal and state dollars in accordance with the various requirements that go along with those dollars. That concludes my comments. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have this time relative to the financial statements or to any comment that I made in my presentation. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you so much. So who is responsible to ensure the follow-up on the findings that we have the letter for, as well as those same findings listed in your report?
Management will be following back up with you as far as what their action plan, and then when we come in next year, we'll actually be following up to make sure they did it.
Is there a timeline that they need to do this, or can we provide the timeline to those?
There's actually, for the findings and question costs, there's actually a timeline included in the financial statements.
Okay. And it is 45 days, 30 days, 90 days?
I don't have that in front of me, but there was a timeline that was actually included in there.
Okay, but do we have a timeline, right?
Oh, yeah.
No? It's already happened?
We can bring you a report that shows you what we did and when we did it.
Okay.
That's actually a required schedule in the financial statements when you have a finding that's required by the local government commission.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, we have, first time we've gotten these, so if anybody wants to look through them and have additional questions in the future, we can address them then. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Have a great holiday, everyone.
So anyway, I have one item to bring to the committee. Is there anything else anyone would like to bring before we adjourn? I don't remember who mentioned it to me, but it was mentioned to me, I guess, at our meeting where we were sworn in about times of committees. As you know, we meet at 4, public safety meets at 5:30. On Tuesdays, public work meets at 5, and general government meets at 6:30. Question was asked about this committee, which meets at 4, if there's an interest or whatever it may be on moving, and I'm assuming moving it later in the afternoon. And now, James, you're here as the spokesman because you have the committee after this. So I'll just open that up to any comments, questions anybody may have, if there's an interest in doing something.
Move it how late?
I don't know. I'm just, someone mentioned to me, I don't remember who it was, so I'll just see if anybody wants to.
I know, I think I was one of the persons who mentioned it to you. And that was for 5 o'clock, to the start of finance meeting to start at 5 p.m., which would have to, if that happened, we'd have to get agreement from
Public safety moved to 6:30.
I had been an advocate of that in the past. And I know in the first, and maybe a couple of years ago, for maybe a year or two, we tried that, and there was no large increase in attendance. And, you know, I'd be happy to look at it, but I don't personally see any need to change it unless this committee feels the need to change it to have more public participation. But we tried it. We televised the meetings so they could be seen.
Yeah.
If folks weren't able to make it.
Okay.
I'm open for suggestions.
All right, Ms. Light.
I guess I'm thinking about the Tuesday meetings that certainly general government goes on way late.
Yeah.
And to actually move that to earlier times, you know, to the 4 and 5:30, like Monday meetings. But
Go ahead, Ms. Perkins.
I like what we're doing, but I know a majority can win, but I hope that we will stay the same for Monday.
May I suggest, Mr. Garrity, why don't you just poll the 8 council members, because I'm not going to try to put together a matrix here this afternoon, figure out who wants to do what.
For both Monday and Tuesday?
For all 4 meetings, yes.
And also, I hope you will keep in mind that when the staff comes at 8 or before 8 in the morning, and on these days they work, and then if we could get some to not stay as long, go from leaving like about 5, like when we leave, and then some going to still be staying for public safety. And then when you look at that Tuesday, it is a long day.
Okay, well, the city manager will poll the 8 council members, and the mayor, whoever else wants to and Lee, you might want to poll your staff.
Never mind him.
Yeah.
All right, anything else to bring forward committee? If not, we will adjourn, and Mr. Taylor, you'll start at 5:30, is that correct?
Yeah, we will start at 5:30.
Okay.
You advertise.